Welcome to Vegan Food and Living's Simply Vegan podcast with me, Holly Johnson, and my co-host, Gabriella Clark. With a new episode live every Tuesday, we discuss the latest vegan news, taste test the newest vegan products, and chat to some of the leading names in veganism. Hello and welcome to Series 3. We're so happy to have you here and really excited for a brand new series of the Simply Vegan podcast. We would love to hear from you as always, so please leave us a review on iTunes or whatever platform you're listening to, and also don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Simply Vegan Podcast to let us know what you think. As I said, we had a little break last week. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, as they say, so hopefully you're excited to join us for a brand new series. And Gabriella, you have some really exciting news as well, don't you? Do you want to share it with our listeners?
Of course, I'd love to. I have been keeping a little secret the past couple of series, so I am expecting a baby.
Yay! Simply Vegan Podcast baby!
The first one, powered by all the amazing vegan food that we've been tasting over the last couple of series.
Yes! And it's due July, is that right?
It is, yeah. First week of July I'm due. My first baby. And so, yeah, we're very, very excited.
So have you done lots of reading around the vegan diet and pregnancy?
Lots of reading. So in my big group of girlfriends, I am the last one to have a baby, but the first one to do it vegan. So of all the things I've been able to rely on my friends for and ask all those questions, the diet side and veganism side was something that I didn't have support on or kind of first-hand knowledge from friends and stuff. So I did do a lot of reading. Some of the reading out there, if you delve too far into Dr. Google, can be quite overwhelming. So definitely you need to pick and choose the articles that you're reading, you know, rely on the information that's out there from the NHS. The Vegan Society is also really great. But, you know, there's no reason why you can't have a really healthy, amazing vegan pregnancy.
Yeah, sadly, I wasn't vegan when I had my two children. So that was, you know, my son's 9 and my daughter's 14. I've been enviously watching Gabriella, just the little bump growing, thinking, oh, it's just amazing. What are the sort of key points if someone is planning for a baby and they're vegan or, you know, they are pregnant, what sort of main pointers would you give?
So I'd say for me, for the first 12 weeks, I chose not to take a multivitamin and I stuck to folic acid and a really good dose of vitamin D. And luckily, I had amazing support from my GP, who around about 8 weeks sent me to have some blood tests where they checked all my levels of things like iron, B12, just to check that, you know, my diet up until falling pregnant was fulfilling enough and that my levels were high enough. And luckily everything looked really good. So I just continued as I was. And then once I hit kind of post 12 weeks, I then did switch to a vegan multivitamin by a brand called Terra Nova. So they do a vegan prenatal multivitamin. And I've taken 2 a day from the 12-week point. And I have to say, I have been so lucky. I'm not sure if I can attribute it all to being vegan, but I have had an amazing pregnancy so far. No sickness, no headaches, obviously battling a bit with some tiredness in first trimester, but generally I felt really, really good.
That's fantastic news. I have to say, with both pregnancies, I felt horrendous. So I'd love to try it again as a vegan, but I'm not gonna do that just for a vegan experiment. It's a bit drastic, isn't it?
It's definitely, yeah, it's easy to easy to do. You do definitely feel more responsibility to make sure you're getting everything that you need. But as I say, that check-in around 8 weeks where all my levels were checked was a huge reassurance for me. And then funnily enough, I had one food aversion, one thing that I went off between sort of 10 weeks and 20 weeks, and that was tofu.
Can't believe it. That baby. No, we need the tofu.
I had to have a word with baby and say, come on now, we can't be vegan and not fancying tofu. Which it did make me laugh. Of all the things that I could have developed a bit of a food aversion to, tofu had to be it. But I'm pleased to say I'm out the other side of that. I'm back on my tofu and I'm feeling good.
Brilliant. Is it normal for doctors to do blood tests at 8 weeks? Because I know they didn't with me, but obviously times have probably changed.
So I don't, and again, I'm only speaking from my experience, but after doing a bit of reading and falling down a bit of a Google rabbit hole, which I probably shouldn't have done, I did start to worry about whether I should be taking things like a B12 supplement on top, because I'd gone to buy a pregnancy safe B12 and none of them were labelled safe for pregnancy that I could find.
Right.
So okay. I called my GP because I didn't know whether they'd have to prescribe one or just give me the okay that it was safe. And luckily my GP was like, well, let's just check your levels. I don't want to give you extra supplements if you don't need them. And they were all really, really high.
Brilliant.
So I think your body stores B12 for a long time in your liver, I believe. And I've only been vegan for 3 years, so I don't know whether I already had good reserves from that, but I also have supplemented as a vegan previously and eat my fair share of nutritional yeast. Goes in and on everything. So luckily it was good enough for me just to last till that post 12 weeks point. And then I switched to a really good multivitamin that now has B12, iron, all vitamin D's, B's, everything in.
Isn't it funny how us vegans are so sort of concerned about getting all our, the right nutrition and all the right levels, whereas, you could be a meat eater and eat absolute junk, and never even consider that you might be deficient in anything.
I think that was the hardest thing for me, because obviously choosing to be vegan is something I've decided for myself. And, it's still, whilst it's growing hugely, as I say, in my friendship group, I am the only one. And you do sort of worry, or I did at the beginning, that I was doing everything right, not just for me, but for the baby as well. And I did take on quite a lot of responsibility, and I suppose in a way fear that, am I giving this baby everything that it needs to develop properly? So I can definitely see how for a first-time mum, and if you are newly vegan or have been vegan a couple of years, how it can be daunting. But my experience so far, as I say, I'm almost 28 weeks now. There's no reason why you can't have a really healthy, energized vegan pregnancy. I feel so lucky to feel so good.
I'm so pleased to hear that. I think it's funny, isn't it? Because like you say, you're the only one out of your friends. And sometimes you can live in a little vegan bubble where you kind of think, most people are going vegan now, or most people are vegetarian or flexitarians, or whatever term you want to give it. And then sometimes you sort of get a little wake up call and you realize that, we are very much in the minority. However, there is a new study that sort of ties in nicely, actually, to the news article is on the Vegan Food and Living website. A new study shows that veganism could replace the traditional diet, which is obviously meat, fish, dairy, and, vegetables and everything else, within the next 100 years. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, maybe not in our lifetime, but maybe in our children's lifetimes, they might see the end of factory farming and horrible things like that, and everyone will be plant-based.
And actually, you say 100 years, and that isn't in our lifetime, but actually that's not a long a long time to see such a huge shift. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it's not. You never know. I mean, being vegan, we might live to 130, 140. But yeah, not if we keep eating all the vegan junk foods.
I know. I have to say, it's been amazing, an amazing time to be pregnant. You know, lockdown has been quite weird, but it's meant that I've had a lot of time at home to really kind of connect and rest and grow my baby, which has been wonderful. But my advice, if you are also vegan and either trying to conceive or you are, not to fall down the Google rabbit hole, because I really did. And especially on forums, there was a lot of anecdotal experience of not just vegan pregnancies, but vegan children, raising vegan children. Oh, well, there's a boy in my child's class at primary school, and I'm not saying it's because he's vegan, but he's definitely the most pale. And there's lots of that. So you just have to ignore that. And like I said, I had great support from my doctor. Midwives have all been really supportive. Don't even see it as a real factor. And as long as you're eating healthily and you're feeling good, then yeah, go ahead.
So we've been taste testing some ice cream, haven't we? Which, you know, ice cream and pregnancy, this is like, they're just the dream team, aren't they?
I mean, in one breath, I'm saying make sure you have a healthy vegan pregnancy. And then in the next breath, I'm taste testing vegan ice cream. But like you say, those evenings where you're tired and you're very hungry, which I have been, I can't complain. It's come in very handy.
It's everything in moderation, isn't it? And, you know, a little treat now and again isn't going to kill us. So
exactly.
We were very excited to receive the Wicked Kitchen range. So I tried the birthday cake flavour vegan ice cream, the cookie dough, they're both £2.50, and the chocolate and red berry cones, which are also £2.50. The birthday cake flavour was literally like being a kid again. It was so good. It was it's, you know, those like sort of sponge tray bakes you get with the sort of buttercream icing on top and the sprinkles.
I have to say, I didn't try this flavour, but when you said birthday cake, that is exactly what I pictured.
It's exactly like that. It's creamy, vanilla. It's like happiness in a tub, if I had to describe it. And for £2.50, I think that is brilliant value. So that was definitely my favourite. The cookie dough one was really nice as well. Chai latte is also in the range, and I haven't been able to get hold of that. So I really want to try that. That sounds lovely, like a really nice warming kind of cinnamon and things like that. The red berry cones were great. I'm not a huge fan of chocolate ice cream. So they're like a lovely waffle cone with chocolate ice cream, red berries, and then like chocolate over the top. I wouldn't usually go for chocolate ice cream, but again, they were really nice. The red berries just kind of lifted the flavour and gave it that little bit of extra sweetness. So yeah, definitely a fan. Which ones did you try?
So I tried the cookie dough as well, and then I also tried mint chocolate chip. For me, the mint chocolate chip was delicious. It was really refreshingly minty, but then had big delicious chunks of chocolate inside as well. Really just reminiscent of a good mint chocolate creamy ice cream. And like you, the price of the vegan ice cream, because often when you go to purchase in a supermarket, you are faced with vegan ice creams being almost double the price of others. So was really impressed with that one. For me, the cookie dough was more like, I found it more like just a chocolate chip rather than that kind of fudgy cookie dough that I recall from other brands or even pre being vegan.
Yeah.
But it was still delicious, just definitely more like a vanilla-y chocolate chip to me.
Yeah. Well done, Derek Sarno. You've pulled it out the bag as usual. Next, we reviewed a more luxury product. It's Raw's new salted caramel and macadamia ice cream tub, available at Tesco, Sainsbury's and Ocado, and also M&S actually in April. This is £5, so it is more of a premium price. However, tucking into it, it really feels like a luxury product and a real treat. I really like this. It was really creamy and milky. I loved the caramelized macadamias, and the salted caramel was just right. It wasn't too salty. I can't stand it when salted caramel is like, the salt is the overpowering flavor. And I really, really like this brand. They've got like a conscious mindset. They're, free from palm oil. They have a long-term partnership with a charity that supports tigers. And it's all sort of, high quality ingredients that are sort of quite natural. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of this brand. So they kindly sent us the salted caramel and macadamia flavour, which was lovely. But coincidentally, the week before, we had actually bought the hazelnut chocolate cookie flavour. We'd had a very indulgent night, pizza and ice cream.
Yum.
I know, and we were blown away by this flavour. For me, one of the best vegan ice creams I've tasted that you can buy in a supermarket. Again, as you say, £5, a little bit on the pricier end, but for that treat, it was so decadent. The hazelnuts, and then you had this really fudgy, delicious kind of cookie dough through the ice cream, and then like the chocolatey base of the actual ice cream itself. It was absolutely sensational. So I definitely preferred that flavour to the salted caramel, even though I'm a salted caramel fan. I'd say if you're going to buy one, for me, hazelnut chocolate cookie was brilliant.
I need to try that one. Do you think it was worth the money then?
Yeah, I do. For that flavour, for sure. It was indulgent. It was rich. Certainly, if you were serving it alongside a dessert, like a scoop of ice cream alongside a dessert for a dinner party, it would feel really luxurious. And definitely, I'd challenge anyone to figure out that it was vegan for those dairy eaters, dairy lovers. But probably for that price point, not something I'm going to add regularly to the weekly shop. No. So that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the final ice cream that we tried were the new Magnums. They are vegan sea salt and caramel, and they're £3.69 for 3. So I think that's a little bit pricier than the non-vegan ones, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like these. I didn't get a huge sort of sea salt caramel flavor. They tasted almost more like vanilla with dark chocolate on the outside. I did really like them. But yeah, I didn't get a huge sort of caramel or salty hit.
So I wasn't actually able to find the salted caramel ones in my couple of local supermarkets that I tried. However, I tried the normal ones and the almond ones from the vegan Magnum range. And for me, especially the almond is delicious. And they, again, from what I can remember, are just really a real exact match from the non-vegan versions. Like you say, a little bit pricier, but hopefully as demand increases, that will be offset. But I'd be interested to try salted caramel, because usually I'm a huge lover, but I haven't found an amazing vegan salted caramel ice cream product yet. So
yeah, I really like the almond ones, and I actually bought some cheaper ones. I think they were own brand from maybe Morrison's, but they weren't anywhere near as good as the Magnum almond ones. So I think they're definitely perhaps a favourite from the range. Well, that's the end of our taste test for this week. Don't forget to leave us a review. Let us know what you want to hear us taste test. Do you want to hear us taste test? Do you want to talk about news? What do you want to hear from us? We'd love to hear from you. Next up, I'll be speaking to Dale Vince OBE, who you may or may not have heard of. He is a really fascinating character. He's the chair of the world's first vegan football team, Forest Green Rovers, which he stepped in to save and basically turned the whole team vegan, stopped serving meat at the football ground, implemented loads of sustainable practices. So they're now, I think they're carbon negative or carbon neutral. He built his own wind turbine earlier on in his career, like you do. And he's the owner of Ecotricity, which is a renewable energy company. So a fascinating man, extremely intelligent, and definitely worth a listen.
I'm really excited to hear this interview. Actually, my partner is a huge football fan. And so we've kind of read lots of bits and pieces about this club on and off. And so I'm really interested. And I just think it's such an amazing way to bring veganism to, the mainstream and maybe a group of people who are new to it. So can't wait to hear this interview.
Hi, Dale. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Shall we start right at the beginning and talk about at what point in your life you discovered veganism?
Well, I guess I discovered veganism when I lived on the road. This would have been the late 70s, early 80s. But I had concerns about eating animals since I was a kid, probably age 7 or something like that. It struck me wrong to kill them. And I found the experience of eating them to be challenging, actually, emotionally and physically challenging. So I guess that was like my first step down that road. And vegetarianism back then, we're talking late 60s, early 70s, that was a very radical, very unusual thing. And mostly the reaction of people to the idea of not eating animals or to the idea that eating animals was bad would be aggressive, I would say. Yeah, but my parents certainly were.
Yeah. I was vegetarian for about 4 years when I was little. And it was kind of like, you just kind of got the processed vegetarian options, didn't you? Instead of having like, a lot more vegetables or anything. It wasn't really necessarily a healthier alternative when your parents didn't understand.
Yeah, I didn't even have that choice. I think, for my family, there was something wrong with suggesting there was something wrong with eating animals. That was like, it was a given that it was normal. That's what you did. And there was something wrong with me for not liking that.
So at what point did you sort of become really passionate about the environment?
Again, that bothered me since I was a kid. I remember aged about 11, looking at all the cars on the road and wondering where all of the fuel came from. I tried to imagine how much there was in all of the cars on the road. I obviously couldn't see them all. I could just see some, but I knew there were others. And I wondered then where it came from and when it would run out. And it bothered me that nobody talked about that, but I knew that it would run out because everything does. So that bothered me. I think it's innate. This concern for the environment has been within me. And then I spent 10 years living on the road trying to find another way to live, a lower impact alternative way to live. And then landed in Stroud in the early 90s with the idea of building a big windmill. So my life's been like a journey, I guess, driven by these concerns, I would say.
So, most people with sort of concerns about the state of the planet might, sign a few petitions, perhaps even go vegan, but you built a wind turbine. How did that happen?
Well, I lived on the road, as I mentioned, for about 10 years, and I lived in a bunch of different vehicles in a bunch of different countries and lay-bys and parks and fields and stuff like that. And it's a really self-reliant, self-sufficient kind of lifestyle. But at the beginning of that 10 years, for light, all we had was candles. And by the end of that 10 years, I had a little windmill and I had some old batteries from a train I got from a scrapyard and some little lights from a boat, 12-volt lights. And so my lights then were wind powered. And so I kind of got a familiarity with the idea of making energy from the wind towards the end of that decade. And I was parked on this hill outside Stroud, 1991, with a windmill on my trailer. And when you live that way, if you're parked in a windy place, and I knew it was. And I saw the first big windmills built in Cornwall, the first in Britain in the early 90s, 1991. And I was just inspired by the thought, really, that I could live another 10 years of this low impact lifestyle myself, or I could try and drop back in and build a big windmill on this windy hill I lived on. And, you know, over the years, we'd often sit around a campfire, our sippies, and talk about, you know, they should do that and they should do this. And I was quite kind of motivated to be the they in that conversation, you know, jump in and do something.
Well, you clearly have done a lot since then. So how did you go from building your own, you know, one windmill to Ecotricity?
I guess it was an organic process. The first windmill was like a crazy idea. It was a £300,000 or £400,000 project, though I didn't know that at the time. And I lived in a trailer. I had no money, no training, and that kind of stuff. And it took 5 years to beat every obstacle and finally build it. And just as I was about to build it, the year before, I could see that it was coming. And I thought, yeah, maybe I should build some more. And in order to do that, I went to see the local power company. They were monopoly buyers back then of generation. So if you built a generator, you had to sell it to them. This was the MEB around where we live. I went to see them to offer them this new kind of energy, green electricity, and they just laughed at the idea. And actually, they said, here's our price. You know, you can't go anywhere else. It was a rubbish offer. And I left that meeting having decided that the only way to build more windmills was to get a fair price for the power. And the only way to do that was to cut out the middleman, this awkward energy company. And at the same time, the electricity market was liberalizing, so it was possible to be an independent energy company for the first time. And so I got some forms from Ofgem, filled them in, faxed them across. There's probably only half a dozen bits of paper. There was no business plan in there. And I got a license to be an energy company and started a company, started Ecotricity in 1995.
Incredible story. I mean, where did you get the funding?
Well, there was no funding. I mean, we had no money, only the money that we made. The windmill story itself kind of is interesting because it became self-funding. So the first thing that I discovered I needed to do to build a windmill was to measure the wind on my site, and it had to be at the height of the windmill that I proposed to build, in which case, in my case, it was 30 meters at the time. Now, I didn't have the money to buy a mast and the equipment for that, but I had the ability to build one, so I built my own. And that quickly turned into a business, building masts for farmers. Scottish Power entered the wind industry in the early 90s, and I did a whole series for them. And that funded the next steps of my windmill building myself, and helped me form Ecotricity as well.
And how has it grown since you started it?
Well, I think today we're like 750 people strong as a team of people. Our turnover is about £250 million, which is mad. We've got about 100 windmills, about 100 megawatts of wind energy. We've done more than energy as well. One of my founding thoughts was to try to change the way electricity was made in the early 90s, because I discovered that it was the biggest single source of carbon emissions in Britain. And it was about the same time that I became aware of the climate crisis. It used to be called climate change back then. It's been upgraded now more recently. And so I thought it makes sense to focus on the big single source of carbon emissions, which is what it did. In the early 2000s, with that kind of well underway, I thought it's time to look out for the next biggest sources of emissions, and found that second and third on the list were transport and food, and that the three together, energy, transport and food, is 80% of everybody's carbon footprint. And for me, that was a really empowering finding. And so we've been working since then on projects in energy, transport and food. In transport, we built the Nemesis, Britain's first electric car, in 2008. Then we built the electric highway, first national network of charging points for electric cars, and there were none on the road when we built it in 2011. And really, that was to break the chicken and egg problem that nobody would buy cars because there was nowhere to charge, and nobody built anywhere to charge because nobody had cars. And in food, we've long been advocates of veganism, plant-based living, and that's most visible through our rescue of our local football club, Forest Green Rovers, in 2010.
So before we talk about Forest Green Rovers, what would you say? I mean, a lot of people are, on a journey with veganism, aren't they? And it might not be environmental reasons that bring them to veganism. It could be health or animals. But I think as you go along and you kind of learn and read and kind of watch, things like Seaspiracy and stuff like that, you obviously, realize what is going on around you. What would you say to people who have yet to switch to renewable energy suppliers like Ecotricity?
I would say if you can, do so. But if you can't or don't want to, it doesn't matter, actually, because the grid is being greened up underneath you. And I think, maybe 10 years from now, we'll be at 80 or 90% green energy on the grid. And it will no longer matter. People won't need to go out and consciously choose green energy because it's fast becoming the default, which is not like it's not like a motivational response, that is it, to say to people, join a green energy company. I mean, I think they should, absolutely, and it will help us get there faster. But there are some people that won't, and there are some people that can't. And to them, I would say it doesn't matter.
Well, that's good to know. It's one less thing to worry about for the moment.
Yes.
So Forest Green Rovers, it's the world's first vegan football team. And presumably they weren't all vegan before you started working with them.
No, not at all. It was a very conventional non-league football club. And it was a kind of rescue mission. It was a rescue mission that started in 2010. I didn't really want to get involved in football, but I didn't want to see this local club go bankrupt, and took responsibility for it. And they immediately bumped into a whole series of things that had to change, things that were done at the club and generally in football as well, that I just didn't sit with our ethos at Ecotricity. So we started making changes and quickly realized that we'd be building a green football club in the process, and that actually we'd be talking to a new audience of people, taking a message that was rarely taken to these people, football fans, who on the face of it wouldn't be very receptive. We wouldn't be preaching to the choir, and that made it quite more compelling to me, really. So that's what we did, and that was 10 years ago now, and we've become, according to FIFA and the United Nations, the greenest football club in the world. We went carbon neutral with the UN a few years ago, and actually we're founding signatories of a UN program, Sport for Climate Action, which is about engaging all forms of sport, organising bodies and clubs around the world in the same stuff that Forest Green has done, in an attempt to reach fans of sport through their favourite sport and get them engaged in the fight against the climate crisis, which is the most amazing outcome from the rescue of a local football club.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, did you kind of sit them all down one day and say, right, lads, we're all going vegan? And if you did, what did they say?
Well, it happened on probably day one or day two of having responsibility for the club. And I was sat in the main suite, and the players were there having some post-training food. And I saw that it was a beef lasagna, and I was horrified because it meant that I was part of the meat trade because I was responsible for Forest Green.
Yeah.
And I spoke to the coach and the chef straight away and said, look, we have to stop this. And they said, yeah, no problem. They're up for it. And when it came to the players, we spoke to them about it from a performance point of view. We said to them that serious athletes don't eat red meat. It will impair your performance, and we'll give you something better. And they were just simply up for it. They had no problem with it.
Oh, amazing. And are they vegan, sort of all of them full time, or a bit of a
Some
mixture?
Are. Yeah, it is a mixture. Every season we'll have a couple of players that take that lifestyle home with them and go vegan themselves or with their families. And often I'm asked, are they contracted to be vegans, for example? So just to clarify, what it actually means is all of the food that we make at the club, whether we're serving it to players, to staff, or to fans, that's all vegan. So when anybody eats with us, that's what they eat. But what they do in their own time, we don't tell them.
Yeah, it's a good way to work it.
Yeah.
So do you think we're at the beginning of a green industrial revolution?
Yeah, I think we are. Absolutely. I think it's underway, particularly in green energy. So when I got started in the early 90s, in terms of modern forms of renewable energy, wind and sun, we had none, virtually none, way less than 1%. And today we've got nearly 50%. This is in England, in Britain. And I think if we really went for it in the next 10 years, we could get to 100%, but I don't think we will because we've got the wrong government at the moment. But anyway, from 0 to 50 in 25 years is pretty good going. I think the revolution in cars has arguably been faster. In 2008, I tried to buy an electric car and there were none in the world, so we made one. In 2011, we started the electric highway, and you could buy a car then, a Nissan Leaf with a range of 80 miles, and charges at that time were 7 kilowatts. If you fast forward just 10 years to today, charging technology is 350 kilowatts, and cars have got a range of 300 miles. And I think 10% of all car sales last year were electric, but the government has said in 10 years' time, you won't be allowed to buy a conventional car, which kind of sounds bold, but actually the industry themselves are planning to stop making them before that. And so in just 20 years, we'll have gone from no electric cars on the roads to it being the only car you can buy, which is, I think, an incredible pace of change. Mm-hmm. And in food as well, I think the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a really big rise in the awareness and the interest and the uptake, really, of plant-based eating. And, more and more manufacturers are bringing out plant-based alternatives. It's in supermarkets, cafes, restaurants, everywhere. Even fast food joints have got plant-based options. And for me, it's like a snowball or a positive feedback effect, because the more availability, the more people try it and buy it. And the more people do that, the more businesses feel that demand and make more available. And so it kind of is a feedback loop, and it's growing very rapidly, which I think is a brilliant thing. So I would say, yeah, in terms of energy, transport and food, the green industrial revolution is well underway.
You sound very hopeful and positive. A lot of people I speak to don't, feel that way. They don't feel like things are changing fast enough.
Yeah. I guess it's easy to fall into that mindset, and maybe I'm just closer to stats than a lot of people are, or closer to the action. This is where I've been living my life. So maybe I'm just closer to what's actually happening. But I'm a very positive person anyway, and these changes now, they're inevitable. To fight the climate crisis, we've got to stop burning fossil fuels and we've got to stop eating animals. Just those two things is all we have to do. It's actually a big ask, although it's a simple ask, but inherent in those two bad practices are all of the problems that we face, all of the various crises, habitat depletion, wildlife extinction, human health, the air that we breathe, not just the food that we eat, and of course the climate crisis. All of them come from just two things: burning fossil fuels and farming animals.
That makes it feel a lot less overwhelming to deal with. It's okay, we've just got those two things to deal with. We'll be all right.
And it's really that simple, and I love that. And I think part of what I try to do is bring simplicity to this debate, because it is overwhelming for a lot of people. The idea of just the climate crisis, never mind all of the other crises that we face, is like, well, what role can I play in that? And actually, all of us every day make decisions in energy, transport and food. It's about how we power ourselves, how we travel and what we eat. And our spending decisions determine which way the world goes round. We've got a lot of agency in this, but it does boil down to just two things, use renewable energy, stop eating animals.
Mm. Do you think that you would consider going for Prime Minister?
Yeah,
I think you'd be great.
Thanks very much. If it was a more open system, seriously, I might give it a go. But it's not an open system. You've got to be leader of one of two big parties, haven't you? And probably to have spent a few decades in politics, which I'm not a fan of. Although increasingly, I think politics is the answer. I think it's the weak link in everything, because we have the technology and we can see the need to change how we live and change our economy. And people want it as well. Businesses are responding, and I think government are really behind the curve. They have the big levers, taxes, subsidies, and regulations. They determine which way the world really operates. And they're the people that need to make the most important changes right now.
Come on, Boris.
Yeah.
Get going.
Here's where my optimism fails me.
What do you think about the pandemic, just to finish off? Do you think that's helped things or hindered it?
I think it helped things because it was a radical interruption in business as usual or life as usual. And it also taught us what we're capable of when faced with a real existential threat. The climate crisis often seems too remote and too global in scale to be very real. The pandemic was right in our faces, killing people that we knew immediately. And, look at what we did. We spent £400 billion in 1 year dealing with that. That's, that's an entire budget to get to carbon zero as a country. That's it, all done in 1 year. And of course, we endured the most incredible changes to our lifestyles through the various lockdowns and stuff. We weren't keen on it, of course, but we did it because it was the right thing to do. And actually, to fight the climate crisis, we have to make some change, but it's a fraction of the kind of changes that we've endured this year. For me, therefore, it's all really positive. This lockdown, this pandemic has taught us that, amongst other things, we're not infallible. And our position on this world is potentially under threat. And actually, it's a problem that we're causing for ourselves. And actually, that we're capable of the kinds of changes that we need to make to solve the problems that we've caused.
Well, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you today, Dale. That's a wrap for episode 1 of series 3. We'd love to hear what you think. Please head over to Instagram or Twitter at Vegan Food and Living and at Simply Vegan Podcast. We'd love to hear what you think. And as always, you can find more news and vegan stories on veganfoodandliving.com. See you next week.